Materials Library
Parsons School of Design.
at Parsons School of Design.
I'm Alison Mears, I'm the Director of the Healthy Materials Lab at Parsons School of Design. Welcome. Anne, you want to?
Okay, I'm Anne Lewison. I'm an architect at Perkins and Will.
Robert Phillips with Carpet Cycle, turning carpets into insulation.
George DiCaro, a specifier at HLW. I actually work with Susan Kaplan.
I'm Pablo. I'm from Brazil and everything as well.
Rachel Ware, I'm with Penny Martin.
I'm Sienna Shepherd, I work as a student researcher at the Healthy Materials Library.
I'm Monica Kumar, an interior designer at Perkins and Will.
And I'm Robin Gunther, an architect at Perkins and Will.
Yay, that's the
We're right around the corner.
Stacked to the audience.
So we,
We have to support our own.
yeah, we're down the road a piece.
But I actually
We're about
heard
like a
this
half,
from
you know,
Stefan,
we're
not from
between
Perkins
17 and 18.
Oh, is that right?
Ryder Parsons, yeah. My husband, yeah. Thank you.
Well,
Do you want to get started?
I think we could.
So I'm just going to do a little welcome and introduce, reintroduce our speakers here so that you know who will be presenting today. So welcome. Thank you very much for coming here today to Parsons to talk about healthy materials. We're excited that you've made the time to join us both in person and online. My name is Alison Mears. I'm the director of the Healthy Materials Lab at Parsons. Welcome. So we're joined today in the second of our conversations about healthy materials by three great contributors here who will talk about this, the issue today, and Wendy Vittori, who will be the moderator for this event. Transparency and material health in practice.
No, I meant this next slide, maybe.
Do we have? Yes, we do. Thank you. We're a little bit uncoordinated this afternoon. So this is who's here today.
It's teamwork, it's teamwork.
It's teamwork, it's collaboration, it's a little creaky. So we're joined by Mary Dickinson from Perkins and Will, who's come here today from Dallas? Yeah, beating the storms to get here. So Mary Dickinson is Perkins and Will, and she's co-director of the Materials Performance Lab. As a regional sustainability design leader at Perkins and Will, a member of the firm's Sustainable Design Council, Mary assures that sustainable ideas are an integral part of the firm's project and practices across market sectors. Fueled by her passion to improve the impact of the built environment on human and ecological health, Mary co-chairs the firm-wide Material Performance Lab and is a member of the firm's research board. She's an active advocate within the HPD Collaborative's User Advisory Panel, AIA's Material Knowledge Working Group, and the Mindful Materials Initiative. We're also joined by Jack Dinning, who's the director of the Dongia Healthier Materials Library at Parsons School of Design. His current work focuses on developing tools for architects serving vulnerable populations, particularly in the areas of affordable housing and early childhood settings. With 10 years of working in architecture, design build, and materials toxicity, he's become a dedicated leader in the drive towards healthier building practices with a consistent emphasis on design for empowerment. Jack holds a master's in architecture from Parsons School of Design, is a graduate of the Healthy Materials Lab, and has moved on to the library. Okay. Susan Kaplan, over there, is HLW's Director of Materials Technology and Sustainability Advisor. She learned specification writing in the public sector and entered the private sector at HLW, where she built their sustainability practice while continuing specification work. She works directly with clients and manufacturers to improve the health impact of products. Susan has led HLW to become a founding sponsor of HPDC, on which she is currently a board member. She teaches at CCNY, where she delves into the toxicity of materials, human health, and life cycle assessment of products. Then there's me. My name is Alison Mears. As I said, I'm an architect, assistant professor of architecture and director of the Healthy Materials Lab at Parsons. I'm a co-principal investigator of the Healthy Affordable Materials Project. Wendy is a partner on that project. The project is a coalition of 4 organizations who work together to incorporate human health as a criteria for evaluating building products to improve the interior environments of affordable housing. I also sit on the board of the HPDC with Wendy. Wendy Vittori, at the end, a moderator for today, is Executive Director of the Health Product Declaration Collaborative, a not-for-profit member organization committed to transparency, openness, and innovation in building products. Prior to assuming this position in May 2015, we have a little feedback. Wendy has served as a leader in business, academic, and civic contributions for over 30 years. She began her career as a software engineer. She's led technology businesses at both Intel Corporation and Motorola. So we're really glad that people made the time today to share their wisdom and experience with us. And Wendy is going to do an introduction, right? Do you want to be just back on the page of
Again, let me welcome all of you on behalf of our collective organizations. We're really delighted that you are spending the time, and we welcome those of you who are on the live stream, who are participating in our audience. What we're going to have today is 3 presentations that are going to share with you different approaches that these 3 situations have developed to use information about building products, their contents, the chemical level, all the way down to the chemical level of their contents, the hazard information that pertains to both human and environmental potential hazards associated with those chemicals, and how this information is being incorporated into the firm libraries, into the project practices, into the interactions with clients, and including how some of the practices are actually reaching out directly to manufacturers to better understand the products that they're making, and to voice concern and interest in having products that use less toxic chemical contents, and point the way toward a future where all building products are contributing in a positive manner to the health of our built environment. So this is a series of 3 discussions in the prior one, and we will be making the videos of all of these available online as soon as we conclude the 3rd one. The 4th in our series is going to focus specifically on the issues of affordable housing pertinent to all of this whole area. But the first 3 are really trying to lay out sort of the basics for practices and practitioners who want to move from a conceptual understanding of this subject area to actually practicing with this information, and then scaling inside of your practice. How do you go through those various steps? So in our first session, we talked about this sort of case to be made at the practice at the firm level for incorporating transparency, what we refer to as transparency. When we say transparency, what we're talking about is the actual information. Making that information shared among practitioners, with the client. Ultimately, what most of us involved with this are advocating for is sharing this information publicly. And we've at this point been able to get over 500 manufacturers to participate in this initiative to share over 4,000 public reports on their products, which are available, and we'll show you some resources at the end of our session that you can follow up with all of this. And so, you know, we're at a point now where a architecture and design practice can really contemplate starting to incorporate the use of this information, as opposed to just talk about what it will be like at some future point in time when there's enough information to do something. We're starting specifically in certain product categories. We actually have a wealth of reports at this point where it's quite possible to find multiple, way more than 3 examples of products that at least are reporting on this information. And so we're going to learn today about, how firms are actually attacking that problem. In our next session, which we'll talk about again at the end, which will be on October 30th, we're going to talk about moving beyond just the management of the information, the basic training, how to incorporate this into project protocols and so on, and start to talk about actually the health information itself. How would you go about using this to look at a set of products and say, I want to select this one as what we consider to be healthier for these reasons. We're going to look again at actual practice examples. We'll touch on some of that today, but today we just really want to show those basics. Where is the information? How do we get it into the firm library? How do we get it to the practitioners in the firm? How do we get people trained? What do we do? How do we get started? And so we really invite your participation as we go through these 3 presentations. Please feel free to raise your hand and ask a question as we're going through this. For the live stream participants, at the end of each of the presentations, we'll check in with the live stream. So if you have a question, please enter it into the live stream forum, and then we will bring out those questions at the end of each presentation. Following the presentations, we'll have time for a group discussion and some comparing and contrasting of the different approaches that we've heard. I just want to point out one other thing about the different groups today. Perkins & Will is, for those of you who are familiar with it, including, of course, many of you who are here in the room from Perkins & Will, is a large multi-office, many multiple offices, large global practice of architecture and design. HLW International is focused here in New York, has international clients, but I believe, Susan, one office?
No, we have several offices.
Several offices, but smaller scale.
Much smaller scale.
And so you'll see both a quite large practice and then sort of a mid-sized practice. And then here at Parsons, we have Jack, who's going to talk about a resource library that's been set up in quite an interesting way, a novel way, as a resource to the entire community. So 3 different approaches, 3 different organizations, and hopefully it will all be very informative. So with that, let me introduce Mary Dickinson to tell us about how they're approaching this at Perkins & Will.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy, and I'm very excited to be here with you today after experiencing one of your great graduates from Parsons. It's wonderful to be here to share many of the things that we're passionate about at Perkins & Will. When I got started in material health 10 years ago, I saw this slide. And like many of you, when you take on an initiative, something motivates you and it moves your heart. And I learned from one of my great mentors who is in the room today, so no pressure on me, Robin Gunther, that when you are trying to take on an initiative and motivate people, the first thing that you need to do is you need to motivate their heart. And then you need to show them how to lead through that with some kind of action, give them a pathway. And so this was my motivation, like I said. Like many studies that you might have encountered, this was my environmental working group published about the American Red Cross study. It's also been done in Canada, but it shows how many of our the substances and building materials can cross over to a child's blood if it is in utero. But so I took on the challenge. I was motivated by it, but like many of us, when we take it on, once we enter it and we were trying to figure out the steps, we realize how big it really is. And when I've worked with many of our folks in the firm, this is how they feel too. They feel like they've been asked to take on a mountain when it comes to material health. And then I give them their first encounter at the HPD, right? And they look at the list of substances that are on the HPD, and this is inevitably what happens. And they're a little over dramatic, but I felt this way too the first time I looked at an HPD and thought, what am I going to do? How am I ever going to identify everything that I want to identify, and how can I streamline this process so that it is timely for our designers, it works within how fast we have to work on projects, etc. Well, that same mentor kind of took the same approach when it came to the mountain, where it was and it was interesting how this aligned with setting up some camps, if you will, along the mountain pathways. That first we have to connect the dots. You've got to talk to people's hearts, and you've got to help them connect their dots. And then you have to help them with their mind shift, make them feel like this is actually achievable. And then lastly, you can never stop walking the talk. You have to get in there, and you have to be brave, and you have to take on things and stand by what you're standing for and your motivations. So what we did is, in that same vein of setting up and trying to apply this, was looking at the whole project process from the kickoff, connecting the dots for folks. Where do they look? How do they find something? And as they move through the design process, right, we're starting to show them that pathway from motivation into the practice, and then at the end, giving them a reason to say hooray and to feel like they're actually getting something done. So let me show you how this works out in regards to, we'll start off with connect the dots. When we're doing the project kickoff, we want folks to start thinking about, okay, what do they need to be looking for? Could they start off in their design in a way if they had enough knowledge where they might design a little bit differently? And we have a couple of tools to do that. One of those is the precautionary list, and if you go to the precautionary list up here in this Learn More tab, you can see many of those studies that have been done, including the American Red Cross, and many things that can help motivate and motivate staff or you to learn about yourself. But then also, they have the substances themselves. And we've gone and looked and analyzed those substances that appear the most in building materials. That if we really want to tackle this issue, let's look at the ones that are the most prevalent and have some of the largest health impacts, both human and environmental. And what I can do is I can go on to one of these substances, such as BPA, click on it, it'll give me my complete health overview, and then I can go on to the health hazards. So again, reinforcing the why. But maybe more importantly with our updates to the precautionary list is that we've also mapped it to where can you find it in building products. So if not only have we listed these for each of the substances, but we also have a way of going through a filter and applying it to a project. So I can come in here and I can pick if I'm going to go through a ground up project or an interior finish out. I can add a filter where I can select the specifications for my project, add then which products would be in those specifications, etc. Or I can dive in right into the specification that I need. I'm working on structural concrete. What substances in structural concrete should I be aware of? If I'm going to make some product selections, what do I need to be concerned about in regards to paint, in regards to drywall, carpeting? So the myriad of different ways that a designer might go about this. Now, this is just setting up the basis of the information, the connecting the dots for everybody, giving them the foundation for what we will always go back to. We always go back to the scientific studies. We always go back to the governmental reports and whatnot. Now, we're going to show folks how do you actually take this database of information and start applying it to the way our designers really work. One of the most helpful things that we have done that has been a breakthrough in the firm to help folks change their mindset is to walk them through the way they practice. And so what we do is we get them together for a workshop. We sit them down at tables and we have a basket of materials, and we take on studios. So we have healthcare studios, we have an interior, commercial interior studio, healthcare. They all have very different problems and different questions when we start working on what their products are made or projects are made up of. And we go through this basket and we go through a space. So say this is my commercial interiors group. I'll want them to look at this space and say, okay, when you're starting to envision what you're going to do with your design, how do you look at it and start to decide which materials this project is going to be made up of? And could those products change based on what you know? So for example, we'll go through this room and we'll start picking up these pieces. They'll start picking up the ceiling tile, and they'll pick up the paint, and they'll pick up the wood veneer, and they'll have that actual attachment to the material. And we'll start talking about it. In the ceiling tile, we have the possibility that formaldehyde is in that ceiling tile. In the paint, you should know that there are alkophenols and the possibility of added antimicrobials to making a health claim. For the carpet, that's the one that really gets to everyone. They pick that up when we talk about PVC and orthophthalates and perfluorocarbons, flame retardants, antimicrobials, heavy metals, and the list goes on. And we talk about what could the alternates be, and could they specify the material differently to avoid some of those substances, or just change the material altogether. And this is, I think, really great because they start to connect the dots and they start making the mind shift change. This could actually happen on their projects. That this isn't the heavy lift, this isn't the big mountain that they had always seen before. And we're also shifting it not just from a commercial interiors or the interiors discussion, but also to architecture, where we really need to make some headway in regards to materials. And start pointing this out. We worked on this with our architectural teams, and we took these exterior facades and started to do the same conversation. What could that building be made up of, and would you change something? You can go on to the transparency site now and you can see some of these rooms, and they'll walk you through the same scenario for those different space types. So then, after we move past how the designer works, right, and they see how they can approach a project differently from the very beginning, there's also, they start moving into the products that they're specifically going to specify. And one of the places they often go for our firm still are the libraries. Mindful Materials, for those of you who have not encountered it before, started off at HKS and has grown into the Mindful Materials, a collaborative where labels can be placed onto binders, materials, etc. in your library, and you can see what kind of certifications and declarations the material has. Now they've gathered all that information, they put it online where you can access it through Origin. And I liked this because our designers kept going back and saying, I would love just to know if we're already doing this amount of work and analyzing materials, just to see what we have looked at already. So we started beginning a pilot in Dallas because we were moving to a new location. We sent out this letter welcoming new reps. And as you dive in, what we asked every rep to do was you needed to be in Mindful Materials because it's a public database, and you needed to have a form of transparency, with the HPD being the preference. So we shared with all of them that the HPD is what we would request because we feel it could fill out any of these other certifications and declarations. But also, there was we gave them the opportunity too where they could provide a letter so long that it is if it was signed by a director or an executive. And the reason for doing that was we wanted it to get this message to get to a high level where they could see that designers and architects were asking for these type of disclosures. We're asking for transparency, especially from some of these, a firm like ourselves. And what we found is that when they start here, they're willing to take the next step to have the conversation about the HPD. And this has been really wonderful in regards to the amount of engagement it's allowed us to have. So next, we took the Mindful Materials and we piloted just to experiment in our own office to see if this was something that we wanted to take elsewhere. We added our own layer onto Mindful Materials. So let's just say the Perkins and Will implementation. And we said if it was in Mindful Materials, they would get a Mindful Materials sticker. And then next, they would get a yellow sticker on that binder if they met the 6 classes of substances. Now this is something that in working with Portico users was identified as the first benchmark of optimization for materials. They're removing those substances. And then next, for textiles, furniture, and wall coverings is the HHI, if it's something that has been listed under the Healthier Hospital Initiatives. And I've provided all of these resources on these pages that you can go to. But if it's listed with HHI, they've met the Safer Chemicals Challenge. And so this is a way of going, of being able to meet that first benchmark through some of these other areas of the material library. Next, if they've met yellow and they remove the precautionary list materials, they get a light green sticker. And then if they've done both the yellow and the light green, and they've optimized to the point of removing all benchmarks and list translators, this is a part of green screen, so that the worst of the worst, then they get the dark green sticker in terms of their optimization. And then lastly, we realized it was trying to avoid the red. It didn't want to give this wrong message, because what we want all manufacturers to feel like coming into the library is that we want them there, and we want to find out any way possible for them to be there. So the red is there to say the manufacturers come in and we've engaged with them, and they have one last thing that they are trying to get us some type of transparency information on. And then the orange are those materials where we're not really there yet with HPD in terms of giving them all the direction that they need for completing it, much of the architectural materials and such. And so when we have a red sticker, we have a month to get this in, and we date this in a catalog or in a database. And then if they get an orange sticker, then we have a year to work on this together. And we're pretty serious about it, and we have lots and lots of updates with the manufacturers. What I want to share with is, while this seems very, very simple, it has done a great deal. For one thing, the designers are not falling down anymore when they see this HPD, and they're not so concerned about that huge list of substances. What they have realized is they've got some critical questions to ask, and it's how transparent is this HPD, and how complete, and how can I work this with this manufacturer? So they'll ask, okay, has it been fully disclosed? Is there a common product, example of HPD, that I can compare to? And can I find all of the substances that I know might be in this material? If this was a carpet, they would want to make sure that this was disclosed at 100 parts per million, so they could see if there was a stain treatment on it. And so they've been learning all of these tricks, and has been a great lesson for them. The other thing is that since January, we have gone through 1,000 products with 70 different manufacturers and had a tremendous amount of conversations. And at least a quarter of those manufacturers didn't have HPDs in the beginning when we started working with them. And they're realizing we want them in the library. There's also been a letter published, this is the Manufacturers 50 through the International Living Futures Institute. And these are manufacturers saying, we have provided transparency, we have provided disclosure, we need you to start specifying our materials, or they're going to go away, or I'm not going to get the basis for my company to continue to support it. And I think when we start these type of engagements and we make our teams very much aware of what has a declaration of certification, they will start to answer this call. The other thing is manufacturers will walk in and they will see labels, and they will see a dark green next to theirs that might not have a dark green, or a light green next to theirs that might not have, and that's motivation for them to start optimizing and to go back and find out what they need to do with their disclosure to take it to the next level. I also put this in here because it's the next tool that our designers are using. This is HBN's Home Free tool, where you're looking, it's a good way of looking at the good, better, best approach of materials. And a lot of times our clients aren't always ready to go to the very best. We want to show it to them, but this is a great way of also giving them a process to get there in the product comparisons. And then lastly, we need to be able to document, right? To show that what we're setting out to do and applying the precautionary list and applying optimization on products is actually happening, that folks have a reason to be proud. So one lesson learned for us was, if you go out and you give someone a very vague goal and you just say, okay, for us, it would be apply the precautionary list, they're gonna think the mountain's back, and that it's going to be a lot for them to have to tackle. However, if we go back and we set some goals where they feel like they can reach the camp 1, or then they can reach camp 2, and then they can reach camp 3, they're much more likely to take it on. So what we've worked on is, okay, designers, look by volume at your top 10 interior scope products. Go look at your top 10 of the architectural, right, and learn from those and share them with everybody and report out. And one of the methods that we've had in reporting out is documenting that in Portico. And what we've seen is that rising to the top are these product categories that everybody is working on, and you're seeing some big market transformation happening, new products that haven't been out there in the last couple of years. And in the end, what people feel like is that they are walking the talk, that they are a part of something big, and they're willing to get on board, and they feel like they're a part of something great, and they just want the ball to keep rolling. So, thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Mary at this point? Katie, anything on the live stream? Okay. So Susan Kaplan from HLW. Susan?
Okay, first of all, that's a really hard act for us to follow. We are, I should say, start out by saying that we are a much more modest approach to this. So lower your expectations here. What are we up to? Okay, so that's HLW. What are we up to? Now, the state of our process is very different. What motivates the process at HLW really is clients. We've been very, very fortunate having Google for a client for a very long time. They've really made us move forward. They've enabled us to enjoy Portico, to look into a lot of things, and really given us a push forward. We have an internal sustainability department and a materials technology department. I should explain that we are the materials technology department. We'll explain that in a minute. We work with systems. We have our own interior things, but we also work with very typical systems. We work with Lead Before, we work with Fitwell, we work with Well. And that again motivates or forms what we're looking at, much more so than at Perkins and Will. We're also establishing our own path, not as greatly as Perkins and Will, but we are establishing our own path. We're organizing our information and creating our own internal lines in the sand. Well, for our internal organization, it's very simple. We have a sustainability department, which has 2 people in it. They work on projects with sustainable wellness goals, include third-party rating systems and custom solutions. Traditional sustainability issues, energy, lighting design, materials, and site development. And current trends encouraging greater focus on occupant health and wellness as implemented through design, and that's working with the designers and the interior. We have architecture and interior designers in my office. The materials tech department, which is where George here and I work in, is really used to be called a spec department. But since we are so largely involved in the materials technology of the office and what happens and what we specify, there are 5 people in the department, 3 of which are responsible for all the sustainability aspects of materials. All things of material sustainability. We support fulfilling the rating systems, and we use leading effort. We are the leading effort for material aspects of the rating systems. All specifications are written by us, whether they have a large degree of sustainability or not. We are responsible for them. Okay, we have learned a lot from experience. Maybe not from our own deciding to learn from experience, but we've learned from experience. We work with Portico a lot with Google from the very beginning, even with Google before they had Portico, when they just had a healthy materials library and their own form of red list. We work with manufacturers and we work with Portico, which can be an inconsistent system, but we still manage to move forward. What did we do? We pushed the industry forward by requesting information from manufacturers. We had to do a tremendous amount of interacting with manufacturers to get them on board to fulfill things. We spent a lot of time with them. We made manufacturers complete and compete, and we have particular stories of manufacturers competing, Armstrong versus Rockfon, where there was a whole big thing about who was going to get rid of their formaldehyde first. And we did a lot to expand the Portico database. Google always praises us for being the people who put more and more stuff in there. So we worked a lot with that, and I can't say that it was always easy because it wasn't. Working with these rating systems can be very difficult. There are very specific rules, whether it's LEED, whether it's Portico, and we've had to, find our way through those and try to not forget why we're doing it. And it's something about all these systems that really doesn't really push forward people's minds. It makes them fill things out and do a good job, but we try to get back to why we're actually doing this. and remember that there's a reason behind this stuff. It's very easy to get caught up in checking off things and numbers and looking things up. We also learned from experience. Lead V4, we just did a few of them, and we had to translate strange things from one place to another. We had one particular project where it was completely designed in Korea. They had no idea that it was going to come to grow up to be a project in New York that was going to end up being a Lead V4 project. And they designed this incredible ceiling that looked like a Korean house. And they wanted to do it in all this heavy timber, and that was the image they had. The problem with that was that it was too heavy for the building that it was going into. So all of a sudden we had to do low emissions, lightweight thing, and have it look okay. And we actually managed to do that through a lot of research. So you can actually move from doing something to actually move to get a product that works. But it takes work. It's not easy, and we learned from doing that. So that was also, okay, remember that we are, materials technology is still writing specs. So we have the point of view of specifiers. Now, what we did was we realized that when you write a spec or you do a project, there are a whole bunch of products that are really not designer chosen, that are really fundamentally chosen by the specifier. Things like, let's start with the specifiers here. Now whatever starts with specifiers, so we'll start them here. Obvious things, fireproofing, fire stopping, joint sealants, plain hollow metal doors, gypsum board, tile mortars, paint types, not colors. These are things that are fundamentally not in the rule of designers. That's a chance for the specifiers to go out on our own and see what we could do before we even get to the designers. So we did that, and and then here's what the designers do. Obviously, they do wood veneers and tiles and carpets and wall coverings and fabrics, and we help them, through it. But that's another process because we have another kind of people looking at it that does a different point of view. So first we do what we can without getting involved with them, and then we move on to help them get through the process. It's a little hard to see this, but we did internally, for us specifiers and people who don't need to worry about, the colors of things. We have a whole chart that we have all the steps, all of the certifications that are needed for these products, all the certifications, the levels of transparency, and we can get a whole lot done on a project before a designer even gets there. Like making sure that we have taken care of our own business. So that's kind of a different approach that we have. It's taken a lot to go through this. We started out we started out doing this for Lead V4 and then realized we can just do this for everything. So that, we learned a lot, and, and then also, okay, so what do we do in finding our own way? We have to do things for our designers too. We didn't leave them out. We didn't leave them out. We didn't forget about them. We have, for the whole firm, we set up a set of places for them to look for, tools. Things that are just spec tools. This is really interesting. For a long time when I was doing sustainability with things, I forgot that we could help the designers a lot by giving them a wide range of things to look at, by giving them the tools that I take for granted as a specifier, like 4 specs in RCAT, which give a whole range of the major manufacturers that produce stuff. It's like what used to be Sweet's catalog. It's like these things that are online, they have tons of information, and it gives you the major players so that you can go out and you see who are the 15 people who make door hardware, who are the 15 people who make things that matter to designers, who are the 15 people who make toilet partitions. The big players are in all that. And they are very likely to be the people who actually have done the transparency things and all that. And have done and been involved in sustainability. Then of course we didn't forget all the transparency tools. And we put all this up, we're putting all this up on our intranet for our designers to look at, okay? So there's all this data that they can look for and look for themselves. But we didn't leave them just there. We didn't just give them that. We actually gave classes to our designers. And very much, very, very much what you said is we started with why. Because I went to, a few years ago, I was at a spec conference, and we were talking about sustainability with a bunch of specifiers, which is really a frightening thought. And I was with a friend of mine who we did the presentation together, and he doesn't think of himself particularly as being a sustainable person, but we were doing a presentation together. And he had children who had health problems. So that he had a very direct, and he started the presentation before I went to all my stuff about transparency and everything. And he started talking about his kids. And that engaged the audience a lot. And that really set me up to realize that you have to do exactly what you were saying, Mary. And so the first thing we did a little bit of science. We taught them a little bit about just the whole idea of what materials do and the cycle of material cycles. Because without understanding to some extent what materials have a lifespan of being from extraction to production to use to demolition, it's good to get people to understand that materials have a long life. And some of that life can be really messy, even in distribution. Then we did the 6 classes, particularly for the architects, which is again what Mary talked about, which is explaining, and of course I think Jack will talk about that some more. And then we talked about really why are we here. We gave a real whole discussion about why are we concerned. Why are we worried? So we got them to try to get the designers engaged in the whole situation. Then I did I did it last year at Earth Day. We did a presentation I called Tooling Around, where I went through the steps, pretty much what I talked about before, of how you go from, like going to the basics of going through common materials, and then going through the spec things that you could find, and trying to, kind of drill down to where your tools are more and more specific. Because, it's because we have to work with them all the time, and we don't want them to feel that they're alone. We don't want them to feel they don't have a reason to do this, but they do have to do it. Now, we do a lot of, as material technology people, and as specifiers, we have a very special, close relationships to manufacturers, okay? Every time a manufacturers come to visit us, and every Tuesday morning, the spec department has their very own group, just the spec department meets with a manufacturer. And then every week we have lunch and learn people come in. And one of my wonderful people in my department is in charge of both of these things. And we let them talk for a while and tell about their product, and then I jump in and I start grilling them about, okay, what are your sustainability things? And it's kind of a toll they have to pay. If you want to come to HLW, we didn't even tell them this. If you want to come to HLW and you want to tell us about your stuff, we're going to make you pay. So they have to come in, and if we don't like what they say, we just tell them more information than they ever wanted to hear. So it's an experience being a manufacturer to visit us. About a couple of years ago, we did a very interesting thing. We had something that we called the reverse wine and cheese, because every Tuesday in HLW, and just before we came here today, manufacturers are invited in, and they give us wine and they give us cheese, and they tell us about their wonderful products. Well, one week we twisted it around, and we brought the wine and cheese, and we invited a whole bunch of manufacturers, and we gave them a lecture on how we're going to do this for what transparency meant, and how we wanted them to be part of this whole movement with us. And it was really, really a wonderful experience, because they were there together with a whole bunch of different people, different kinds of manufacturers, all together talking to each other and having to listen to us. And they had wine and they were fine. We actually want to do this with developers and other kinds of people. And we would be very nice to do that maybe with Perkins and Will, if you'd like to do that with us. To have a nice big kind of reverse wine and cheese with something other than manufacturers, like developers and real estate people. Because we did this with HDR. Then that line in the sand that I was talking about, we don't have our own precautionary list. We have yours. We have several other people's precautionary lists, but we do give preference to materials with transparency data. Preference materials that pass LEED V4 emissions testing, because that's a pretty high level of engagement. We limit the use of PVC whenever we can, because it's very difficult to do that. And we investigate where to plug materials for emissions testing and compliance for leading all projects, because even if it's not a lead project, because those things tend to be on the more dangerous side. This morning, we had an insulation guy come in, and I was very nice to him. I didn't carry on endlessly about the fact that I was very worried about his foamed in insulation, but I was nice this morning. We have to look for the future. I mean, we have to plan for the future. We've been lucky. I've in my department, I've gained 2 people in the last year that really are moving us forward. So I feel that we are making progress. It's not as fast or as supported by the entire firm as in Perkins and Will. But one of the things that I really want to do is get an internal grassroots movement together, because I know that there are young people and old people and whatever people in my office who really care about this stuff that aren't being tapped into. And I think it's really important, and I think it's a big problem that we haven't done that yet. And I think more integrated responsibility. As much as I'm a spec writer and I have to make sure that all the products are right, I'm not sure that the idea of I'm supposed to be happy when they're worried about stuff and they come to me and say, well, Susan, what should I do? Probably not the end. As much as I try educating them, I really do have to get them to do some more work. We are working on establishing more firm-wide tools. And I want to integrate integration of some new material ideas. Because, and also traditional materials used in new ways. I mean, for instance, this is an example of a timber structure, which is a high-rise timber structure. Because we do have architectural designers in my office that could learn from all of this. So, though we do not have as an elaborate formulated system as Perkins & Will and many other firms, we are definitely in there punching and trying our best to do stuff.
Thank you so much, Susan. And so, Jack, share with us what's going on with the Healthier Materials Library.
Absolutely. I think that's a great setup. I mean, both, because we've just been trying to, I think, consolidate all these conversations with not just talking to manufacturers or designers, but like you say, like talk to developers or talk to basically everyone who's in this room and make it so this can be a dialogue that's not just one person's responsibility. That's what's needed now. So I guess we are focused though on the designer side of it. That's who we're interacting with most, and kind of that designer user experience and transparency. And starting with this idea that no one's actually trying to cause harm. No one's specifying materials and specifying things that they know are going to be toxic, knowing what those effects are on people. But at the same time, like Mary mentioned, the manufacturers have recently said, listen, we're participating in transparency in these programs, but the architects aren't specifying products. And so if you're not involved, we're not going to continue developing this either. So recognizing that it hasn't been as quick to be adopted as some would hope, just trying to ask why. So this was just looking at, when we take one of these disclosures, and this was printing out a disclosure from Portico's method, and trying to compare, this was for Cambria, the countertops, looking at that versus the common product profile, so you can kind of see what's in it, what's missing, and I think this is kind of the way that we advocate for being able to evaluate materials. And like Mary mentioned, generally the first reaction is to just keel over. Like, you see 7 pages long of chemicals and hazard data, and you don't really know what to do with it. So the general reaction then is simplify information just as much as possible to be so basic for designers. And what we're left with is just these certifications, but they're all abstracted, so just these color levels or number levels, and now we're trying to compare silver against gold against a number system, and it's like a high number good or a low number good, and it's just there's no way to actually say what one means relative to the other, let alone what any of them mean to health. So what we're trying to do now is really focus on how we can get all the data that's been collected over, I mean, the last, I will say, decade or so, it's been such a huge movement in transparency to finally get all this information. So now how can we put it into terms that architects can actually use and translate into decision making? So just want to share some of the kind of tools that we've been developing internally, and also just more of, I guess, the principles behind these tools, because I think this is somewhat of a jumping off point, but really if we can all, it's going to take a lot of architects and people from across all the industry working together to develop what tools are going to be needed to actually implement this kind of thing. So the first principle behind this is starting with the high-level goals, because I think Susan had mentioned that we often get caught up in the weeds and the details of some of the chemistries, and that kind of reshifts the conversation, so we're not talking about what it is we really care about. So if we think of just even the fundamental material concerns, because these can be broken down into all different levels of granularity, but if we're thinking about human health and social justice, climate change, environmental impacts, resource renewability, and information transparency, how do we present those in a way that's actually, like, if a designer's assessing a product, they know they're thinking about this because it relates to human health or because it relates to social justice, not because it relates to some chemical abstract number. So one of the tools we use is using the UN's SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals, thinking that this is a metric and standard that is most globally accepted as a high level of goals that we can all sort of agree upon, or at least we can all talk about. It's a common reference point, it gives context. So thinking about how do these major material concerns relate to these different sustainable development goals. The major ones being impacts on health, decent work and economic growth, climate change, and resource renewability, or resource consumption and production. But then with that, they also have specific targets. These are all targets that are, I guess, positive, and they're looking in the future and saying what's the ultimate setting that we want to reach. So it's not just flagging what the bad things are, but it's trying to have a projection of good things we can work towards. And then saying for each of these major targets or goals, what are the indicators, we'll call them, that can be used in our metrics. So if these are some of our most trusted health certifications, if we look at the content screening and optimization programs from Declare's Redless Free or IFI's Redless Free, Cradle to Cradle's Material Health Certificate, and Green Seal 11 standard for paints and coatings being one of the major applications. But these are all pretty high levels that we can use to trust, and that gives, we'll say, is an indicator of material health. We can do the same kinds of things for transparency, where we set a certain bar and have certain levels and saying, well, we want a fully compliant version of this, not just any version of it. But then put that across the board. So if we have these we've identified 6 major concerns of materials, then here's the different certifications that can be used across all of them. So then when you're assessing a few different product options, so say like our sustainable product option 1 participates in a lot of IFI programs, from Redless Free to the Living Product Challenge there. The second option participates in more cradle programs, and the third in a variety of independent certification programs. You can then just translate that in terms of how they impact your ultimate goals. It keeps the conversation back to that ultimate goals, things you care about. That's back to the health, back to the resource renewability, back to environmental impacts. So it's not about any given proprietary certification program, but it's really about the conversations that we want to be having. So if that's thinking about trying to keep it high level so that we're able to sort of think about it in context, that also has to be backed up by having deeper levels of information to this. So if ultimately the result from that first exercise is you're saying, well, 62% of the materials in this building were able to contribute to this goal of human health, what does that actually mean and how do you back it up? So that translates into, well, what product categories was I able to do this in? And what metrics were used to be able to qualify for that? So then in any given category, we can then say, well, for carpet, I was looking at these layers, these specific concerns in it. It was the stain repellents, the fly ash, and those different layers because they have these chemicals in them, which can be linked to these health concerns. So still having those deeper levels of information to all of this, but being able to then be able to make a statement on it that everyone's able to understand or is able to connect with. So then applying to project-specific context, I think this is, like Susan was saying, this is where you make it meaningful. This is where you connect to people about the real health concerns that they're thinking about in their setting. So we're working with Bernheimer Architecture on a seniors affordable housing center in the South Bronx, thinking about what are the specific issues to seniors in that area, from asthma and respiratory disease, heart disease, obesity, cancer, that then we're saying, well, what materials then are really going to be our focus in this project? So it's even just that first step of saying what's our focus and why does this matter to this specific population. So it's really just framing the conversation. Doing the same kind of thing with LTL architects in an early childhood center in Northwest Arkansas. So in an area where health is so critical, especially to early childhood settings where they're critical point of development, then what are the key issues that they were facing in Arkansas? So immune disorders, learning disabilities, pediatric asthma, preterm birth, childhood obesity, and saying what were not just being able to map these issues to then what kind of chemicals they were most prevalent in that category. So what are the endocrine disruptors? What kinds of materials are they used in? So I think this also, a lot of this is sourced from Perkins and Will's list of associating certain chemicals with then the treatment types to then the materials they're found in. It starts to give you a direction of what is linked. Where should I be looking when I'm concerned about kids' health? And then not just siloing this out to a discussion of health, but if we're really saying like we want to implement these considerations, thinking about all the different considerations that go into it. So this was coming from Martha Lewis, who's with Henning Larson Architects, but she's one of the advisors to Healthy Materials Lab. But thinking that if we're thinking about like trying to have, I guess we're trying to think about health, environment, ethics in terms of like sort of what we feel responsible for, but we're also responsible for meeting code requirements for budget. We want to have an architectural expression. So when we're thinking about any of these materials, we should be thinking about all of these things together. So this was actually coming from the Bernheimer project for the seniors housing. But then so when we evaluate health, some of the first feedback we got was, all right, so we want this basic tiered ranking system of A, B, C, and then there was an F too. But then they said, well, we need a green, yellow, red. So things like HBN's, stoplight, like good, better, best charts, really helpful just for user experience. Then also thinking about what are the costs that go with any of these products. Are they locally available? And so then when we have our ranking, we can say, you know what, like our A+ product, it was really expensive. It's probably not going to be the easiest to get in, or we're going to have to put our entire budget into that A-level product. But if our B level is almost as good, it costs much less, maybe then we can also address floors and wall tiles, and just we can address much more and stretch the budget to go longer because we opened up this kind of what our criteria could be. So being able to, we usually want to make absolute statements, so being able to make concessions in some areas, I think overall can make a project much healthier. So then lastly, promoting continuous improvement with these systems, which a lot of it comes down to documentation and kind of having shared systems. So if we look at the way that this is often benchmarked in many of our standards, like with LEED, if you just need 25% of your total products, what does that actually mean after a certain point? Like you've hit that criteria in the project, and then what? Like you don't carry that knowledge on, there's no incentive to do more, and how do you glean anything from that for the next project? So going back to this framework using the Sustainable Development Goals, I thought it was really important to capture every major building division and saying, well, I was able to meet the criteria in these categories, not this one, but then ultimately you're saying, well, then these categories are kind of the ones that are most readily available to achieve. So in your next projects, these are definitely ones you can count on doing, or you can advise people who are first coming to this, here's the categories you can focus on. They're probably easiest to get to. And here's the ones we weren't able to achieve. These are kind of the next level, so that next time we can try to improve and continuously get better and better. So if at that first time we were at 62%, try to get to 70 and then 80 and talk with other firms. Like, we really weren't able to achieve this category. Do you have any recommendations? Are there products out there? So I think just being able to document projects in a way that continuously builds on it and doesn't just hit some abstract number. So I think those are kind of the tools, and some of the tools and more the principles that we've kind of gleaned from user experience. So at the library, we have probably hundreds of students have come through this semester alone. We are constantly doing workshops with classes, with professionals, manufacturers coming in, architecture firms coming in. So we're trying to figure out everyone in this puzzle to say how we can move everybody forward in conversation. And so I just want to sort of end with that this is also just a jumping off point, that these are kind of principles that we've found, but if other architecture firms or designers or anyone out there has they've developed their own internal tools or they have certain lessons they can learn from it, I think the more that we can all connect and get together and kind of share these things, it's just, that's where we'll be able to make real differences with this.
Thank you, Lynn. Any questions for Jack? Anything on our live stream?
There are a couple of questions, but for Mary and Susan. First one is from Megan.
Maybe we need the mic there. Do we need the mic?
No,
You've got it? Okay.
From LGS. When using HPDs in the design process, do you use the info on the composition percentage of each material in product selection or just the materials identification? For example, if an HPD says the product contains 1% BPA, do you use that 1% for anything, or are you mostly interested that the HPD identified the product contained BPA?
Okay. Well, I would say it's pretty finite in regards to the amount. So if we find that the HPD has BPA or one of those substances that we're concerned about, then it is, we want to find an alternate that avoids it completely, not the 1%. And that's because you're going to start getting into a lot of science in regards to how much is someone exposed to, right, in some of these substances. You never know in terms of their daily lives. And also, when you start getting into the amount that can impact somebody, these have swings like nobody's business, right, in regards to materials. So, for example, when we looked at one of these studies that have been done that I have been talking about, the same amount of Ritalin, a dose of Ritalin that's given to a child is basically a tablespoon in a large size swimming pool, right? An Olympic size swimming pool. That's about the amount of Ritalin, in comparison, that a child is given. That's the amount of lead that they also could be exposed to and start having some type of bodily reaction to as well. And so when we start putting those kind of comparisons on things, I don't think we want our designers to start being the judge of how much, right, is going to be okay and how much is not. So we take the precautionary approach of we'd rather find an alternate that avoids it completely.
The second question is from GLR Group. For Mary and Susan, what are a few ways to balance health and environment considerations? For example, if two products have both HPDs and EPDs, do your teams use LCA iteratively to generate data supporting one?
Well, I think it depends on, honestly, it depends on the project. Because it's nice because here we're talking about health as a primary concern in this particular forum. But it could conceivably be in a project where that particular concern might be for energy. So it's not, these decisions are not always cut and dry like that. I would like to say, perhaps as an individual, that I would always choose to say that I was going to worry about health first. But that's not the way of the world. I think it's very important to remember that every project is different and that you can't walk into a situation and say, I'm going to be sustainable. It's very important, and we talked about this, I think all of us talked about this, that you have to focus on the specifics of a project. And there will be clients and there will be situations where you have trade-offs. We have to face that. It's not always going to be an easy choice.
I would say the firm is definitely interested in moving towards a way of looking at material health, environmental health, carbon, and social impacts all in the same lens, and allow that to be the one that we look at when we make recommendations For us, it was the mountain. It was, we got to tackle something, and we have a standard of care that we have to take care of when it comes to our clients. And so we have to give them this type of information of what kind of health impacts could they be facing if we were to specify certain products and give them alternates, right? But, and I haven't met one client who said, don't apply material health to my project. Their concerns are the cost, their concerns are what happens with maintenance, etc. Now, but I do feel that that conversation will change when we start to say, let's specify this differently because of the environmental impacts and because of embodied carbon, etc. We'll certainly have clients that are interested, but I think I'm not going to run into as many as I do when it comes to the health component. And that would be a new way of looking at materials and how we have to have a conversation. It would be a conversation change.
Yeah, it seems as if one of the common threads throughout this is, you know, how do we relate this to the client's situation? Mm-hmm. And, you know, one of the themes we talked about in our last session was also, you know, very much, you know, you can look at it as a return on investment, you know, from the client's perspective, what's in it for me? And I think we did see 3 different approaches to this. Jack, you know, what you presented using the UN bridge that I would imagine for some, you know, clients is something that they know about. You know, for other clients, they might not know about it, but I think in the context of the library here, having that resource sort of spelled out really gets people thinking about some of these alternative ways of framing, you know, how are we going to frame this? And that, I was just talking earlier today, you know, with one of our panelists from last time, John Amatruda from Vidaris, and we were talking about this subject area within their firm, and they work as consultants on a variety of projects. And, you know, he also brought up that this is one of the first things that you really have to get dealt with in any client engagement is, you know, what are we bringing in here? I think one of the perspectives I find interesting about the Perkins and Will approach is that, you know, you've created sort of a system there. And so when a client is coming in, presumably, and this is a question for you, Mary, I mean, are they seeing this as part of sort of how we do things here at Perkins and Will? Is that how this is presented, or at what point in a conversation with a client does what you showed us come into the discussion?
Well, I think even prior to the client coming, when we talk and we share all of these lessons with our staff and do all of this training, it's okay, we're putting this out to the world, we're sharing this, we're in these type of presentations sharing this is the tools that are put out there, and this is how we're operating and how you've been trained. And so it's an expectation to have these conversations up front. It's because you want your client to be motivated too. You want them to go through that change of heart, right? And for them to feel that their experience that they've had on that project, that you gave them a means to an end, that wasn't so cumbersome, that didn't kill the project budget, and it was at a positive note, and it keeps it going.
So part of the practitioner's responsibility becomes to sort of pass on this perspective to touch the hearts of the client that you showed us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I don't know that every client comes to us with that in mind, saying I went to Perkins and Will because of material health, but we have more and more clients coming and hearing about something that we have written or have spoken about, et cetera, and they're wanting to know more.
Yeah. Susan.
I think something that I didn't talk about, but which is very true at HLW, every time we go out to a presentation or to a proposal to get a project, part of our presentation is to talk about material health and to talk about these things so that, you know, we're pitching it before they even get the job. We get the job.
What typically is the reaction when that?
It's a very mixed reaction. I mean, we get questions, and sometimes they say, "Wow, that's a great idea," and sometimes they say, "Well, we're not interested." I mean, we get the entire range of what you could get, but it does at certain points say people go, "Wow, we didn't think of that. That's great," and sometimes, of course, we want that. How could you not include it? Or and sometimes we get, "We don't care."
Yeah, I think one of the challenges we've all been working on, who are working in this field, is how do we make this easier? How do we remove the mountain? How do we make it, you know, the mountain's there, but here's Camp 1, you know, and this is what a reasonable expectation. And how do we get the cost and complexity down? So I guess a question for all of you is, as these different methodologies that you've shared with us, what has been your experience on real projects with implementing these ideas and these programs? Do you find that, you know, they're fitting into the normal project flow easily? I mean, what are some of the experiences that you've had with doing this on actual projects?
I can share. Jack, do you want to touch on anything first?
I'll follow up.
Okay. I would probably share, there are certain things that have become an easier lift. As we've worked with manufacturers and have shared this higher and higher demand, certain things are coming out of the market, such as the ceiling tiles without the formaldehyde. Those used to be a premium. And now we have manufacturers that are changing their plants and removing the formaldehyde completely. And now that's no longer a complexity, right? So, okay, when? Yay. We don't have to worry about that. We can specify it the way we need to. But then we run into other products. One that continually, with every project, we have to share the comparison is the resilient floor. There are new products hitting the market all the time. That's something that if that product fails, could be a major issue, including an issue of trust with the client, right? So sometimes I might have to serve as a broker to help get the price down and to make sure that the warranty is going to be met and I know what the follow through of the manufacturer is going to be. Or I'll work on a test fit area in a very high traffic situation so they can experience it before the floor goes in. I find myself doing a little bit more in the way of in between the client and the manufacturer, just to make sure that trust is there and that we're not going to let the client down. And that we continue on this mission together in terms of material health. That certainly has been true with our American Cancer Society client, where they are really invested and we are very much invested too in not letting them down throughout this process. So we're constantly searching for what is going to meet our material health goals. What are some of those new innovations, and continually bringing them to light. And what's interesting, at first, the conversation with them was, okay, what are the products that we need to go with? And now they're realizing this is quite the evolution. As the market changes like we want it to, as this market transformation that we're all on a mission for happens, we're always going to be bringing up new stuff. The information is continually going to be changing. And I think that's just kind of like been an aha in that journey together.
I think also what was interesting for us is to realize how much of it really, in terms of things that are not designer oriented, that are things that the specifier does. What's interesting about that is those tend to be more consistent from project to project.
Yes.
So those become like a much easier thing because you're going to have tile mortars on every project. And those tile mortars, there may be 3 or 4 types of tile mortars. But once you've done that, you've done that. But you haven't picked your tile yet, right? Mm-hmm. So that's been something that was like an aha moment for us. But I think that everything else you say is true. There's extra effort. I've been through the whole thing with resilient flooring too. You know, like, oh no, and that we've had problems with those. You know, what are we going to do? We really want to go back to vinyl. You know,
I think also just changing some of the conversations when we're talking about price to not just be saying what are the first costs to it, right? Where vinyl's always going to win or usually going to win. But like, if you're an owner, developer, someone that's going to be invested in this project long term, then after 10 years you have to replace it, or what are the costs of maintenance and resealing, so that then overall life cycles, something like linoleum or rubber is going to be a much better payoff. I think one of the focuses that we're trying to have in terms of how do we lower the costs of doing this, that's why we're focusing on user experience. We've heard that the cost of, or the time it takes to evaluate a single product option for living building challenge is about 7 hours. So when you think about like the 200-300 products in a building, and that's just like final selections, this is a research intensive time that's just not accessible by most projects, by most architects. And with the Healthy Material Lab and the grant that we're working on, being funded for affordable housing residents or designers, everyone involved, we need this to be accessible by everybody. so that any architect can be doing this in an easy, like just a more efficient way. So I think that's why we've tried to simplify what the user experience is. And I know that doesn't address some of the things that transparency has of like really getting into every single chemical in the contents and stuff. So I think there's going to be a discrepancy. There's probably going to be like some blowback from people who have really worked with manufacturers on this. But I think there's just different processes for different teams involved here. But that's at least how we're trying to address making this affordable to the architecture side of it.
Yeah, and I think that's really the focus that we wanted to have for today's discussion. You know, obviously there's the mountain is still there, and if we're at Camp 1, there's 2, 3, 4, etc., and then there's the summit. And I think part of the trick here for our entire community is for people to realize that the fact that we can't necessarily get to the summit at this moment doesn't invalidate or make any less useful getting a lot of people to Camp 1. And that, I think, you know, we're seeing 3 different approaches here, you know, very interesting to engage people, start training people, start providing methodologies to do this work. So let me ask if there are any questions from the audience before we wrap up. Yes?
Hi, thank you everyone for your time. If we carry through the mountain analogy and say the top of the mountain is that we don't have any materials that are available that have any of these harmful chemicals, what do you think, and this is a question for everyone, has had the biggest impact on market transformation? Has it been the individual one-on-one contacts with the manufacturers? Is it putting Armstrong and Rockwell against each other? Is it benchmarking systems, incorporating these standards, or just from your personal experience, what do you think has had the most impact?
I would say it's the relationships. It's realizing that within our work in a firm, it is not one person that can get this done. It is a group. You wouldn't want to go up on a mountain by yourself, but a team, it's a much different approach. And everybody can engage someone differently in regards to clients, in regards to manufacturers, et cetera. That we need other firms involved. It can't be just one firm. That if we really want to see at the summit the market transformation, it's everybody learning from each other and then getting to working towards that next camp. With the manufacturers, it's those relationships and not making them feel like they're not being heard. And I found it really important when we started working on the library, right? That it wasn't okay, there's the door. But more so because they couldn't, meet a certain level of disclosure. It was more, this is how we see it. Please explain how you see it.
Right.
And maybe we can start to work on this together. I can share some of the information that you find you're very passionate about and important, but then you can also take back my lens of looking at your material and what's really important to us. And because of all of those relationships, you just see the movement growing and growing and growing. And you get to the grassroots, right? What you were talking about, that group of people. When we did those workshops in the offices, we only had a couple of material health leaders, and now we have over 14 folks that are working on that library, donating a couple of hours a week. And that, over 14 people with 2 hours a week, you can imagine how much then that compounds everybody working on an issue. So I'm loving the relationship part.
I totally agree with everything you say, and I think another thing that I've experienced is that it's very important that we talk to clients too. I think that the big clients, the big people out there like
Yes.
Google, like Etsy, all these people that have names, that have a lot of real estate and do a lot of work, really need to do their job and pitch in, because that is so motivating to manufacturers and to architects. And whatever we do, that's wonderful, and whatever interaction we have with the manufacturers is necessary. And obviously, we don't want to go a mountain up ourselves, but we want motivation to get up that mountain, and so do the manufacturers. And I think it's really important that we start really focusing on getting bigger and bigger clients to really support this whole idea.
And both in trying to encourage people with these motivating factors, and whether it's kind of policy transformation or certain tax incentives that are going into it, but also understanding what the current hurdles are. So like just when we're looking at what are the hurdles to architects now, I guess maybe 5 years ago when we were saying what are the major hurdles to manufacturers, and they're saying, well, we have to do a different product disclosure for all these different programs, and every single project even might have its own set of criteria. That's what was, I guess, a barrier to participating in this kind of thing to manufacturers. So now with things like Mindful Materials and Origin and Portico, that there's a single source where manufacturers can just deliver their information, work with them. And that's a huge thing that gets participation going. So the more we just find out what are the hurdles for all stakeholders involved, we can sort of try to take those down.
Yeah, I would just comment that, you know, obviously from a macro perspective, all this work that we're doing is voluntary. It's working within the market mechanisms that really come down to supply and demand. And I think all of these components become really important. But the point that the letter, I think that Mary, you showed from some of the leading manufacturers that participated there, these are people that have now for 5+ years been working hard. Many of them have done many disclosures. Some of the leaders have actually produced HPD reports for their entire product line at this point in time. And so what really is going to make a difference is when they start to see the uptake of their products increase versus products that don't have this information available, versus products that didn't eliminate the formaldehyde, et cetera, et cetera. And this is sort of the frustration point that a lot of the manufacturers feel right now. And so we start to get to that tipping point in markets, right, where there's enough information, there's enough of these efforts, where that change starts to filter through to the actual procurement. But all of you working in projects know that projects themselves are multi-year efforts, from the sort of realization that we're going to use technology like this on a project through to the specifications to ultimately the procurement down here somewhere, which could be years later. And so just really recognizing that we have this role, I think communication, and that's one of the reasons we want to do these sessions, is to start to communicate more broadly with new people, to really get the word out, what can be done. The more projects start down this path, you know, today, if there are people seeing this who haven't started on a project, and you can start tomorrow, we have these resources that are here to help. And that's really what we want to do, but I think it's really going to be this accumulation of efforts that start to tip things over. Robin, were you wanting to share a thought on this?
I wanted to ask a question that relates to what you just said, and that is that those manufacturers sent that letter saying, how is this going to translate to sales? And I'm curious to ask people on the panel what you think the obstacles are that are not translating to sales. Like if in fact in a product category there is a good, better, best, and some of these manufacturers are well established, but tell me why you think it doesn't translate. What are the real obstacles in practice to picking the healthier product? You sort of mentioned cost, but beyond, but what do you think they are?
One of the things is that we're talking about firms here who are involved in this, who are working on this. I don't know that if you did a study of every architectural firm in America, what percentage of them are really involved in this.
Right.
And I think that's a problem. I think we're having trouble because there isn't enough of other people who are joining us. So I think that's part of it.
That's a really good point. Part of the reason why we're here today in regards to sharing it with everyone, because we need more of these requests, more of this understanding, hopefully seeing how we talk through this process. One of the big things I think has helped us is when we do some of these workshops and folks recognize what the alternates even are. I think there is such a desire within design to kind of go with what's comfortable, right? My comfortable process. Yeah.
And the products that you know and love.
And that you love and you know they're going to perform, and for folks to take on, you know, there's 50 different manufacturers on there, and who knows how many products they actually represent. So to take on and show folks, okay, we want you to take on this many different ones out of the stock that you're used to. And let me show you the examples of where this has been used. Sometimes it's hard to go back and have all of the answers that they want before they're really willing to make the switch, right? And so that's what we're really trying to help them on at the very beginning, is to have a little bit more faith in their fellow designer that's been working on this and can provide them some information and be willing to take on maybe just a couple of new products. Try them out and then go to the next one.
I think that's one of the really tangible suggestions that you focused on, Mary, like the top 10. I would even boil it down to, you know, what are the top 1 or 2? So, you know, when you think about products that you select and you lead to be specified, and you think about the ones you use most,
Right.
of those, are any of them ones where you're looking for this information? Have you even checked to see if this, because if you've been using it over the years and you feel confident, like you say, you maybe aren't even aware of whether that manufacturer is engaged or not. One of the things we've done in the last month is introduce with the HPD repository capability for a user to actually reach out to the manufacturer and request HPD be created. And this is available to any user of the repository, so that we can start to have that sort of process, and they will receive a request. It would come from you as a designer. You could say, I'm interested in using your product on a project, and it doesn't have an HPD. I'd like you to provide one. And then they would be able to get back to you. And so that's a new feature that we just rolled out in the last month to try and help architects and designers take that next step. But I think the reality is if every architect and designer had engaged on just their top 5, we would have many thousands more HPDs. Just the top 1, we would have many thousands more. We have over 4,000 of these reports today, but we would have many thousands more if everyone just did their top 1.
And I think it's take it beyond the interior scope.
Yeah.
You've got a ton of transparency, right? And I'm glad it wasn't where it was a few years ago. We've got so much transparency on interiors materials, but now we need to start pushing to the architectural materials, and we need that to be a part of the same architectural conversation.
Also, I think a big movement has been from, like, for instance, Portico, which is regrouping itself. And the way that they're regrouping is this whole idea of prioritizing. I mean, I think HBN is doing that too. I think the whole idea of what products are the ones that are going to get you the furthest, which are the products that are being used the most. I mean, when you look at your palette of whatever it is, what are the products that are everywhere? And those are the products, not only are they everywhere for the manufacturers, they're everywhere affecting people's health because they're the most ubiquitous.
Well, and if you have a conversation, if I go and have it with the interiors folks, I say, okay, you're going to have a ceiling.
Yeah.
You're going to have paint. You're going to have a solid surface. You're going to have a floor.
Right.
If we have that conversation over and over and over again, the answers start coming like this because you've done it how many times? And then when that manufacturer comes in with a new product, we go, okay, new something to put into the conversation. This, everybody gets excited again. Okay, how does this fit in? What do we think about it? Have we tried it? Same thing with architecture too, and we're starting to get into that habit. What's your skin? What's the cladding? What's the glass? What's the concrete, the floor, on the outside of the building or the surrounding site, the roofing material, and because it's becoming a repetition, part of our process, now it's something that I think folks are really getting used to, and it would be great to have others doing the same thing.
Yeah, so it's becoming more and more doable. Let me just see if there's any other questions on our live stream participants.
Can I just chime in on that one last
There are
part?
2?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
This one is from Lisa Conway. Given the urgency of climate change and its impact on human health, how can we better address the climate action SDG and consider the carbon footprint of materials which is missing from all of this goal?
So this was sort of one of the reasons that we looked at the SDGs overall, just that like we said, addressing health can be something that gets a lot of emotional buy-in from people, and it's something that clients might be more willing to participate in. Some of the other areas that they're not directly impacting occupants or that client, it's something we want to be responsible for, but it's harder to get people to spend money on that kind of thing. So, I mean, we were looking at the carbon emissions, carbon footprint of materials as the way that the metric for tracking that potential climate change. But by being aligned with the SDGs overall, being aligned with this framework, that's something that businesses, corporations are all adopting, because it then can be something that they use for branding, for marketing. I'm saying we're committed to this kind of goal. So I think being able to just make that part of your identity is what then is going to get buy-in for this kind of thing. Because when you're just sort of arbitrarily trying to make that decision out of the goodness of your heart, I don't think it gets recognized as much.
I also know that the AIA, Material Knowledge Working Group, is working on a 2050 pledge that would be one where it's very similar to 2030, where architects would look at from a health scope, the EPD, carbon, and then also social side of things. Going to experts to help set up the parameters of what would one have to meet in terms of prerequisites and then levels of accomplishment in each of those different segments, because we want to start working on this issue. And what this will do in terms of challenging each other is to look at it and see, is there certain design decisions that we can just make as designers and in the way that, in our process and the way that we go about it.
Well, I
certainly would think that that's how carbon is going to come out in some of these
and all
environmental impacts.
And all these things are not unrelated. I mean, that's something that we have to remember. I mean, certainly a lot of things that happen with change of climate are going to affect people's health. And certainly that's going to affect people's social justice issues. So it's not, I mean, it's not like we're talking about toxicity in a very specific way, but honestly, when you want to talk about material health, you really have to look at the larger thing of what the health implications of all these other issues are.
Yeah, I think the other thing that we're looking at is really the process of harmonization across all of these different efforts. The different ones have different pros and cons, but they've evolved somewhat separately. And so we have quite, I think, a strong intention among the various participating groups. One of the things we do in the HPD collaborative organization is we host a harmonization subgroup where we bring together the different parties. That's really a key part of what our organization's role is to identify these areas of for harmonization so that we can make this all more comprehensible. And if we can harmonize these different standards and certifications, then they can start to work together more coherently, as opposed to I have one from column A, one from column B, and what I think Jack showed earlier is just become very confusing to people. So that is really an industry level effort among the various groups, and individuals can participate too. So, you know, joining one of these groups, I think, is really a great thing that individuals can do to show their support. There was another question?
Yeah, the last one is from Sasha Dron from Corner Co. For our panelists, where are you looking for transparency products? What is your ideal case for finding this information? Did you see value in manufacturers posting? And maybe reevaluate the first question.
Say it one more time.
Seems there are two questions.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the first was the where are you looking for transparency and what's your ideal case for finding this information? And the second one is, do you see value in manufacturers posting this information on their own website linked with the product?
I think
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jack touched on it,
Absolutely.
right? When in regards to Portico and Mindful Materials, this one place to go.
Yeah, I mean, being able to have a sole source when you're not bouncing around to dozens of different product libraries, I think is just an immediate way that you can start to make it an easier design process. I'm just like, here's my pool of products that I want to be selecting from. I think we're also often met with the not ideal state of just, instead of sourcing from that pool in the first place, we're just given a product and said, like, is this good or not? And that's when you have to start reaching out to the manufacturer. So having that information on the website is definitely a beneficial piece to it. But it's not always just going to be situated exactly where you want it. It usually requires at least searching for it or a call or tracking it down more.
Yeah, one of the things we do with the HPD report, which is sort of this comprehensive report on material health, is we have this repository, which is a public resource. It's available to anyone. The manufacturers publish their HPDs there, and then they can have just links to their website. We push all of that information to the various libraries, whether it's Mindful Materials or any of the others. And so I think it's really critical for the manufacturers on their website to highlight their participation in these programs, so that no matter how you go, you're going to find it. At this stage of the game. You know, what we're trying to do is make the reports accurate, consistent, and reliable, so that we don't have bad information that's out there, and it's easy for an architect or designer to say, this is a verified report, this is a certification, this is a published report, versus something else. And, you know, I think realistically we've made a lot of progress on that particular front right now. And again, this harmonization is key in connecting the systems, the IT systems underlying this all electronically, so that you as a user, it doesn't matter where you go, you can have whichever one you like, but you're going to get that consistent, reliable information. So with that, let me just turn it back over to Allison to kind of wrap up.
Yeah, resources we wanted to share. Thank you very much. That was a great conversation. Thanks for your presentations, really enlightening. We had some additional resources that we wanted to share with you. I think everybody has touched on most of them, so there may be a little bit of redundancy here. We have this series of online courses that are offered through Parsons Open Campus. If you're friends of the lab, we can sign you up and you can get a discount rate. Actually, if you turned up tonight, you can sign up for the first one for free. But contact us. We think education is fundamental, obviously, in this area, so that's the first step. Our website also has a lot of information. This is a great page that we share with people who are unfamiliar with this topic. It really introduces people to the topic of why materials matter and why we should be interested in making them healthier. A bunch of tools and guides. One of the first things we did when we started the lab was we aggregated a lot of information that was in different contexts and put it all in one place, and that's helpful. Different approaches to how we understand material health, different design approaches. And then some materials guidance, and I think this is kind of resources that have been shared previously. So this is a good one-stop shop to go and find lots of information in one place. And then product evaluation systems here, so that including HPDC and green screen and cradle to cradle. Again, it's a one place that you can go to and link out to different resources. And then some guidance to how you actually evaluate a product. Some quick tips for what it means, what disclosures mean, what certifications mean. Again, if you're unfamiliar with this topic, these are good prompts to help you start to access and open up this material, so that you're not kind of in the weeds there of not even understanding where to start. HPDC has a range of tools and guides that are particularly important. So this is the first page of their site, and it gives you a general introduction as to what the HPDC is as the industry's leading open how you can walk through that process to achieve that credit. And then a range of resources too, including case studies, online courses for both just general transparency, but also help with training the team, and also tools for manufacturers. This is, you want to explain this, Wendy? This is the open standard, and just really looking at the different versions of the open standard and why the versions are changing and
The
evolving.
support portal, so it's available to anyone. You can go in and type in a question. If you have a question about transparency, you can go here, you can search the knowledge base, you can ask a question and someone will answer.
And what's great here is to see that actually the HPD is constantly being updated, and it's important to know kind of what version you're working with, and that's something that kind of is a prompt here to remind us all that that evolution is actually making the standard more and more robust, right, as we move through time. And this is the repository where you can find which particular products actually have HPDs, so a link to them through the repository. And then the continuing education courses that are offered through the HPD, so you can get training in understanding how to use HPDs. Materials Matter have some great materials, great information, including this white paper. This is something that owners are particularly interested in. Are there risks associated with this material? So that is a good introduction. This is a new publication from the AIA and ARAP, that also starts to introduce kind of protocols and frameworks for working, a system of working in this area as well, which is particularly helpful. And the AIA's Committee on the Environment too has a lot of resources there. Harvard Chan School of Public Health, a lot of the publications that are on that side are extremely, Joe Allen, extremely helpful in terms of quantifying the human health impacts of buildings in terms of worker productivity in particular, interior air quality in particular, good resources to also share with clients. And we just wanted to announce that our third in the series of discussions is happening October 30th. If you're on our mailing list, you'll get information about this, and the title of that is Moving Beyond Transparency, Practicing Material Health Now. Not tomorrow, but right now.